Hey guys, it's Christina with Christina Cakes It, and today we're going to be making an all buttercream floral cake. So the reason I'm making this cake is because last year I made a buttercream succulent cake, and it's actually one of my most popular episodes, and I wanted to do a follow-up cake using all buttercream flowers. So my vision for this is just like a ton of flowers all over the cake, super colorful. So the stuff to make this cake are, I'm gonna be piping a variety of flowers. So I'm first gonna start with the large rose, and then a small rose, a peony, a chrysanthemum, a carnation, and a basic 5-petal flower. Then I'm gonna stick the flowers all over the cake, and I'm gonna add some greenery as backdrop, and it's gonna look beautiful. So before I get started piping the flowers, there are a couple things that I do want you guys to know. So obviously I have my cake here, it's already been crumb coated. This is a 4-layer 8-inch cake. I wanted a lot of space on this cake, so that's why I actually added an extra layer and made it 8 inches. This whole thing is gonna be covered in flowers, so I am not worried at all if this looks a little bit like a messy frosting job, which it kind of is. The second thing that's really important is when you're piping flowers, you need icing that's a stiff consistency because you want them to hold their shape. So I used a crusted buttercream recipe. The full recipe is also in the show notes. So it's kind of funny because this recipe is actually all shortening, but it crusts really nicely, and that's what I used for all the flowers that I'm gonna show you. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with piping my flowers. So the first flower I'm gonna show is how to make a large rose. And what I'm gonna be using is a Wilton Tip 124. It's really just like a giant petal tip. So I have my flower nail, and I'm gonna go ahead and put a dot in the center and place my wax paper. So you can buy squares, but I usually just cut my own because it's more cost efficient. So you guys have probably seen a lot of different roses piped. They're like the most popular flower, and they always start with a mound of frosting. And I actually found a tip from another YouTube channel. So Preppy Baker taught this to me. So what I'm doing is I have my frosting, and I'm just adding a little bit of powdered sugar. And I want to make this almost like cookie dough consistency. Just gonna set this over here. Because I'm going to actually make the mound with my hands, which I have found is easier than piping it. Alright, so this is pretty thick. And what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this, and I'm going to actually make like a cone shape on my flower nail. So I'm taking a little bit of the frosting, and I'm just going to form a cone shape onto my flower nail. And it doesn't have to be quite perfect. So a little volcano here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm taking my narrow side up, and I'm gonna go around the top of my volcano to make even more of a point. So this is my Wilton Tip 124, and I'm just gonna go around here to try to form the inside of the rose. So we're here, and what I'm gonna start doing, again, narrow side is pointed up, I'm gonna start making, I call them rainbows. So just around the center, I'm making arcs. And you're gonna see I'm starting each arc in the middle of the last one. Then I'm gonna move my way down the rows, and again I'm staggering my rainbows, so each one starts in the center of the last one. And I'm just turning my flower nail as I go. And as I work my way down the rows, I'm gonna start opening my wrist up a little bit to make the petals more open. And once I have my large rose, I am going to set it aside on my cookie sheet because eventually these are all gonna go into the refrigerator to set and harden. So the next flower I'm going to show you is a small rose, and it's exactly the same technique, but we're using a different tip. So same thing, I'm just gonna add a little bit of Confectioners Sugar to my buttercream to make this like cookie dough consistency. So I'm gonna pipe a little bit of buttercream onto my flour nail. Put my square on here. And just like I did before, I'm taking a mound of my cookie dough like buttercream and I'm gonna make another volcano. So I have my cone just like I did on my large rose, and I'm going to go around the top with my narrow side up to make the rosebud at the center. So a little bit pointier. And just like I did my large rose, I'm going to make rainbows. And again, I am almost at a 90-degree angle here, going around the center. And I am staggering them as I go around. And the row underneath, I'm starting in the middle, just like I did on the last one. And as I start to work my way down the rows, I'm opening up my wrist to make the petals a little bit more open. So the next flower I'm going to show you is actually my favorite. This is going to be a Buttercream Peony. I'm going to put a little spot of frosting onto my flower nail and put my wax paper, just like I did with my rose. So I'm going to add my mound here to the middle. And I don't want to make it a cone. I'm actually making, it's almost like a cone with the top chopped off, like I want a little flat top here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm taking my Wilton Tip, the Wilton Tip 3, and I'm going to add some anthers in the middle, so just press down and pull up. And you can see from the side that these are sticking up. And next I'm going to take my C-tip and so this looks kind of like a teardrop here, and I want the narrow side up, and I'm just going to carefully pipe 3 petals around here, around my anthers. And then just like the rose, I'm going to pipe petals around, keep going. Peony, this one's gonna look a little bit more closed than the rose, so I'm not super opened up here yet. And then I am going to start making some rainbows towards the outside, just like the rose. And as I continue around, I'm gonna open up my wrist a little bit more, open up the angle. And then just like the other flowers, I'm gonna take this off the nail and set it aside. So the next flower I'm gonna show you is a chrysanthemum. And just like I did with all of my other flowers, I'm gonna pipe a little dot onto my flower nail. Stick my parchment paper. And for this, I'm using an Ateco Tip 804, and I'm just going to pipe a mound of frosting. And I'm going to use my Wilton Tip 81, and this tip is going to do the work for me. This is like a C tip, and I'm just going to go around the bottom and pull out. And of all the flowers that I prepped before for this episode, this is the one that took the longest, but I really like how it looks. So after you get your first row of petals, you're just going to continue making another row above, And you can see that this tip really just does the work for you. And after I've piped all my leaves, I'm going to fill in any spots that I see that look a little bit blank. So the next flower I'm gonna make is the Carnation, and I actually really like this flower. It's a great filler, it takes up a lot of space, and it's super simple to make. So I'm gonna go ahead and pipe a mound of frosting using my Ateco Tip 804. And I'm using my Wilton Tip 104 for this, and this technique is really easy. It's almost just like I'm making little ruffles on this flower. So Wilton Tip 104, narrow side up, and I'm just going to start making ruffles around my mound. So working from the middle out. So just short little ruffles working around. So the last flower I'm going to show you is super simple, and again, this is a good flower for just to add some color and coverage to a cake. So I'm using my Wilton Tip 104. My narrow side is pointed to the middle, and this is a 5-petal flower. I have made these in both 4 petals and 6 petals, just kind of depending on how much you turn your wrist. So my tip is almost flat against my flower nail, but maybe like a, let's see, like a 15-degree angle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And after I have my 5 petals, I'm just taking a little dot of yellow in the center. So this next part is the fun part. This is when I'm gonna start placing all my flowers on. So I'm gonna start with the top of the cake, and I am gonna be using some white icing to adhere my flowers to the cake because this has crusted and the flowers have as well, and I want them to stick. And so I'm just placing based on my preference. Placed all my flowers, I'm going to go back in between these spaces I'm adding some green. So I'm using a Wilton Tip 1M for this, and for the really small spaces I have a Leaf Tip 352. all buttercream floral cake is complete, and I think it turned out super pretty. And this cake I think can be used for many different events. And I do hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and you learned how to pipe some really pretty flowers. And if you did, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel.